I don't know if you remember, but when I first met you, um, I'm a writer, and there's a line that I've written. It's called um, "Existence is an advertisement," and I
Mm.
shared that with you. And it's a realization I had in the past year that that's what all of life is. It's an advertisement. Every
Right.
person has to learn how to market themselves. And a year ago, Rick Rubin, he spoke to Gene Simmons on his podcast. And there's something really interesting that Gene Simmons had said, which was everybody in KISS, they were all students of how do you get something that's not going to come to you? And the
Mm.
example he used was Colonel Tom. What he would do is he'd pay these pretty girls to come to the front of Elvis's shows and they'd cheer on and go crazy. And
I
that
didn't know that.
attracted, yeah, I didn't know that either. And it
Yeah.
attracted like a crowd to come to him. And so he
Right.
used that as an example of figuring out a way to get something that's not just going to come to you.
Right.
In your experience, let me ask you, how do you get something that's not going to come to you by itself?
So, if we're talking about marketing in general, right? I think um, most for me, the way that I am in the field that I'm in, and even when I did real estate, I'm very approachable and I'm very transparent in what I do because a lot of people can read through, the jive, man. A lot of people can read through whenever you're full of it, when you're blowing smoke. So, I never get caught in a lie. I never promise more than what I can that I can give, and I'm always upfront with everybody whenever it comes to whatever services I'm providing. Whenever we did real estate, I owned a real estate company in the '90s and early 2000s. We really branched out to the Latin community, and we were very relatable, right? And when we made commercials, and at the time it was radio, really, and most advertisement was done through paper, through like the newspaper and stuff. But it was more about sharing how we can serve, right? It's how can I bring value to you? What am I doing? Because like today, I'm in the treatment industry. You know that, Omar. I own a treatment center called Suarez Recovery Services, and we provide basically a detox or a start of a detox for people that are struggling with substance use and alcohol use disorder. And whenever I'm talking to somebody like a referral partner, somebody that's going to be able to do business with me, what's the difference between my company and, let's say, Methodist or Memorial Hermann, right? It's that they want to deal with me, right? So you have to be a likable person, right? I don't market my company as much as I'll market myself. Just kind of like what you said when we started out. It's like, how can I be better? How can I be more trustworthy? It's because I'm very transparent and I'm very vulnerable. And I share some of my personal life stories with my own battles with addiction. And I'm not ashamed of them. I'm not ashamed of the fact that I relapsed. I'm not ashamed of the fact that, that I lost everything. I lost my marriage of 27 years. I use that as an experience to shed light on the fact that I'm vulnerable too, and I'm a human being. I'm not just a company. I'm you, and I make mistakes, and I'm relatable, but I grow from them, and I use those experiences to help my clients, to help people that are struggling with addiction, because a lot of people are suffering from getting ready to lose their job, getting ready to lose their marriage, getting ready to lose their children. I lost my son because of my battles with my addiction, and he's my life, and it's just very disheartening whenever somebody you feel like is only wanting to get you to go to treatment because you're a number, or you're an insurance policy, or you're a bottom dollar, or bottom line, you're a dollar. It's like I want to get people into treatment because I want to help, and I'm very passionate about what I do. It's a line that I heard a long time ago, and I told my kids growing up. I have a 26-year-old and a 27-year-old as well. And I told them, I said, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Right. And I think that's a big part of being able to market yourself is truly believing in what you market. There's a lot of companies that have came out to me and offered me jobs, executive roles, helping them run companies, helping them build companies, and I've turned them down. And they were very, very lucrative positions, but I turn them down because I don't believe in what they do. And in order for me to attach a company to myself, I have to believe in their values. I have to believe in the system that they do because I'm going to be a part of branding that company, and my name is going to be attached to that. And my name is something that I hold very dear to me because for me to build my reputation, regardless of my mistakes, is a big part of who I am. Right? Does that make sense, Omar?
It does. Yeah. How did you become an addict, if you don't mind me asking?
How did I become an addict? Well, I believe. Um, all right. So addiction is classified as a disease, right, by the American Medical Association, right? And the reason that addiction is classified as a disease and your medical benefits actually cover, um, you know, through your insurance for you to go to treatment is because it's a disease. And the reason it's a disease is because a part of a part of your body that's an organ has to be failing. And the part of the body that's failing when it comes to addiction is your brain, right? Your brain is faulty, right? That's what they've attached to addiction. Your neural pathways, the way you think, the way you act. So if my neural pathways and my neurotransmitters are sending out certain signals, it's because my brain is trying to protect itself, right? So what's happening is when I feel anxiety, depression, PTSD, I have a lot of trauma from my childhood. I was homeless at 14 years old. I was involved in a life of crime. I was a part of organized crime. I went to prison when I was 16 years old. I was in and out of jails all my life, and I had to do a lot of bad things in order to make it in that lifestyle. And we all use drugs and alcohol because it was the norm, right? Now, what happens is when you're feeling those feelings, those negative emotions, you instantly want relief. So your brain is telling your body to use something, whether it be prescription medication, which is great if you have a doctor, a pharmacist, a script to go to get some kind of prescription medication to help you deal with your mental health. Or if you don't, you reach for what your surroundings is drugs and alcohol. And in the Latin community, it is very normal for everybody to drink. So there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing bad with it, right? So I started drinking at a very early age. Now, what happens is the mind is cured with drugs and alcohol, whether it be um, prescription medication, drugs, or alcohol, street drugs, right?
What do you mean
What
by that
happens is,
part? The mind is cured. What does that mean?
so by that I mean the mind is cured, meaning if I'm struggling with disassociation, okay, if I'm struggling with PTSD and I immediately reach for a drink or a drug, it immediately goes away. It calms me. It cures in that instance, the moment, the feeling, the negative emotion. So my mind is now accustomed to, through my neural pathways, using drugs and alcohol as self medication for relief. It's using it as a defense mechanism. Our mind is a beautiful thing, and it's marvelous to truly understand it. I've studied psychology, I've studied neurology, and the science behind addiction. And in all reality, it's depending on what we're using, what part of the lobe, right? We have the frontal lobe, we have the central lobe, right? The frontal lobe, that's where all the logic is at, right? The central lobe, that's where it's your fight or flight, right? And what happens is once we start using drugs and alcohol to help manage our mental health issues, conditions, right? It works great until we become chemically and physically dependent on drugs and alcohol. Now, I'm no longer drinking or drugging just to calm my mind or just to calm my mental health. I am now drinking or drugging because once I stop, I feel like crap because I'm going to a withdrawal. Because now my body is chemically and physically dependent on that drug or alcohol. That's why drugs and alcohol are so illegal because of once you become addicted to them, once your body chemistry and you're physically dependent on that drug and alcohol, man, you start feeling like crap when you're going into detox or withdrawal symptoms. So now I'm no longer using drugs and alcohol to deal with my mental health. I'm also using them to deal with my physical pain and the anguish that comes along with withdrawal symptoms. right? So it works. It works great to cure you of your mental health issues until it doesn't, because we become chemically dependent and now we're physically addicted to the drugs and alcohol. And that's when you become an addict, because now I go into this circle of trying to stop using, and then I go through withdrawals, I go to treatment, I take care of this mental health, I take care of I remove the drugs and alcohol from my body, but I never address the underlying issue. And the underlying issue is always going to be my mental health. 100% of addicts have some kind of underlying mental health condition. If you're a true addict of drugs and alcohol, 100% of them have a mental health condition that they've used drugs and alcohol in order to cope. Now, there's a big difference, because you asked me what made me an addict, right? There's a big difference between a heavy drinker that can become physically and chemically dependent on drugs and alcohol, right? Than an addict who has mental health issues, who needs drugs and alcohol to help them to steer. Now, if you're a heavy drinker and you've drank for, a month straight, you're in college, you just like to party, you like to hang out, you like to drink, and you go 3-4 days, you go through your withdrawals, and you can stop, you're not really an addict. But that doesn't mean you didn't go through withdrawals, right? It doesn't mean that you weren't chemically dependent on that for that short time. Whenever you're a true addict, it's when your mind, right? In the alcohol, in literature of alcoholism, it talks about a psychic change that happens in your head when you become an addict. It talks about what's called a symptom called the phenomenon of craving. And when the phenomenon of craving occurs, nothing in front of you will stop you from using drugs and alcohol, because it has been triggered. And now all you see is relief. All you need is you want help for your mental health, for that feeling. You know
So
what I'm
how did
saying?
you turn off that phenomenon of craving?
So you turn off that phenomenon of craving by using, right? That's how you turn it off immediately, right?
Well, to
But
break
but
the
it
cycle, to get off,
so
how do you turn off that phenomenon of craving?
we have to address our mental health. We have to address the mental health. So the first step in recovery. So there's a big difference between treatment and recovery, right? Treatment centers, rehabs, you get treatment there, right? Which is basically a place that you go to get sober for 30 days. But true recovery is a complete lifestyle change and rewiring our brain and the way that we think about drugs and alcohol and our mental health. This is the truth, Omar, is feelings, emotions are not a reality. They're not, even though they
That's really what
feel
it is.
real in that moment, right? They feel real in that moment. The pain, the anguish, that those sweaty palms shaking. I mean, that nervous feeling that you get is not real, because it's going to pass, right? The strongest feeling or emotion on earth is love. I've loved 4 women in my life, in my entire lifetime. And I cannot tell you that I love not one of them today, right? So I
Mm,
know those
wow.
feelings can come and they can go, right? They're here today and they're gone tomorrow, right? So what I'm getting at is understanding your mental health and understanding that feeling will pass with time, because it's not a reality, right? You and I today having this conversation is a reality. You're sitting in that chair, I'm sitting here in this living room, and yes, we're real, but the feeling is not. It's gonna pass, right?
Yeah.
And we have to understand how to withstand that feeling without using drugs, alcohol. Myself, I've also used women in the past to feel better. You know, if I
Anything can
have,
be an addiction. Yeah.
if I have if I feel anxiety, depression, at night I feel lonely. I was married for 27 years, like I shared earlier today, and you're used to being with somebody for so long, then it gets lonely at night, and then I start feeling depressed and anxious again, and why, the sense of worthlessness, right? And it's like, why can't I, so what do? I want to use, because I want to change the way I feel. I want to feel better immediately. Omar, I use drugs and alcohol because I like the way it makes me feel. Period. That's it. That's the bottom line. I become an addict because I don't want to feel like shit all the time. So the thing is, I can also plug a woman in there, because I can use a woman to change the way that I feel. You know what I'm saying? Sex feels great. Emotional connection with the opposite sex, or whatever, if you like the same sex, whatever, I don't care. But with another person, it feels great. Getting that reinforcement, that validation feels great. But I don't need it today, right? I like it. I would want to have it, but I don't need it today. Like, I don't need drugs and alcohol in my life today. And it
You
all
know,
comes through me understanding my mental health and understanding
yeah.
it's not real. It's gonna pass.
When I met you 8 months ago, the thing I noticed about you was you didn't seem needy. And I think there's something to learn from that. What did your addictions teach you about neediness now that you're sober?
So today, I don't want to need anything in my life because in order for me to uh, protect my peace is very valuable to me. And if I need a woman, if I need drugs, if I need a job, if I need something, I'm always dependent on it. And drugs and alcohol will fail. People, your children, your parents, your spouse will fail you because we're human. I might need them in a moment of my personal crisis, and they might be going through their own circumstances. So they might not be able to be there for me in that time. So they won't be there for me at all times. So I have to understand that I have to put myself in a position today that I don't need anything. The only thing that I do rely on is one thing that is constant, and I believe it's God. To me, God is very important to me. I don't care what version of God you look at, but in order for me to stay sober, I have to depend on something greater than me, greater than human existence that can help me relieve me of alcoholism and addiction. Omar, I've been an addict since I was about 14 years old. I'm 46 today. I think I'm 40 something. I don't know. I like to tell my girlfriends I'm in my 20s, but that's fine. That's another subject, right? I'm 40, 46, I think. And the truth is that I've um, I've always been an addict. I've always struggled with mental health, right? So the question today is how can I not lean on something else to change the way that I feel? Period, point blank. And the only thing that I know that never changes, that is always the same, that will always remain the same is God, something greater than me. And I believe in a God that's all powerful, all knowing, doesn't have a sense of time or presence or anything like the universe, man. It's a lot different than this softer generation has a cookie cutter approach on God. Well, God allows me to do this and God allows me to do that because it's all about feelings, right? We just talked about feelings not being a reality. And the feelings being like, I need to feel good. My God wants me to feel good. And I don't necessarily believe that. I think that trials and tribulations, they make us stronger. They build resilience in our lives, right? So I think that, God at times will let his hands go and say, walk through this so that you can become better at it when you come out. The other day I was struggling severely with some depression and some feeling of worthlessness because this is not another day. This is a couple months back. My girlfriend and I broke up, and she was one of the girls that helped me get sober this last time around. And she was a good girl, But unfortunately, her now that I'm well into my recovery and doing good things, her values and her morals weren't lining up with mine, right? And a lot of it had to do with our spiritual connection with my higher power. And I had to let her go. We ended up separate, going our separate ways. It was a mutual decision. And I was cracked, man. I was fucking cracked. Like I was like, man, I couldn't stop thinking about her, what she was doing, where she was at, who she was with, wanting to call her. I was calling out to my spiritual advisor. He said, man, read the Bible. So I sat down and I read the Bible. Man, she calls me, dude. I'm like, fuck. I don't want to answer because I know it's going to put me back in a really messed up place. It's disturbing my peace, obviously, right? So I don't, I end up texting her, hey, come over. She ghosts me. Cracked again. I'm cracked, bro. Right. So now I'm depending on her, just like we said, right? So it's like now I'm in a position that I get on my knees in the middle of my living room and I'm screaming. I'm like, God, help me. God, remove this from me. But you know what, Omar? My God is not a genie. And my God isn't a vending machine to where if I put in a certain amount of dollars or times that I read or prayers in, that he's going to return me with something, right? Because my God always answers, but he doesn't always answer what I want him to answer, right? Because sometimes the answer is no. People always say, God didn't answer my prayers. God didn't answer my prayers. Like, yes, he did. It just wasn't the answer you wanted. It was no. So sometimes the answer is no. And sometimes the answer is not yet. That moment, whenever I was on my knees, begging for help, like I said, months ago, this is probably before I met you, it was like I had said, God, remove this from me right now. And he said, not yet. But you know what, man, is that it made me so much better today because that feeling of anxiety, of loneliness came back. It came back months later. And then I was prepared for it because I had already gone through that anguish. I already went through it. So I understood it sober, without another woman, without my wife, without a girlfriend, without, anybody else, without my kids, without anything, just sitting by myself and understanding how to live through that emotion sober, without any other additional help, just relying on God again and saying, God, you got me through it before. I know you won't get through it again. Right. So now I'm prepared for it. That's a huge part of how I deal with my mental health today, Omar, is using my personal life experiences as tools and resources to prove to me that I've already made it through a dark place. I've already made it out of hell and back. When it comes to relationships, when it comes to drugs, alcohol, prisons, the gang life, I mean, anything, I've made it out of that. And I use that life experience and that feeling that I had in that moment to understand that this feeling that I'm going in today, I'm going to get through, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not a
You're
reality.
a walking example of hope.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I try to do that because if you see like on some of my social media and some of my posts, man, I'm not ashamed of my relapse. I'm not ashamed of my past. I was at
And I like
first.
that part right there because it takes some real strength to tell the truth and not be shy about it.
Yeah. When I came back into the industry, people shunned. It was because I was a big part of the recovery community for a long time in Texas, and when I relapsed, I was out for a while, and when I came back, it was like people didn't want to mess with me. Like, oh no, Mundo's, like I had the plague or some shit. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, that's cool. So now that I got my stuff together, man, and I use that experience to help other people, man, I've posted videos of me in active addiction, that I
I
can
saw.
barely breathe. I can barely move. I'm breathing. I sound like a dying hog when I'm breathing. It's just like you can't hear. I mean, and I can't walk. I can't move, and I'm severely overweight. And I just couldn't do anything. And then I have a video shortly after that of me working out, and showing what I had to do in order to get my physical health back, which is a part of my recovery. And then I talked about it on my podcast that, if I relapse again, then write my obituary. You know what I'm saying? If I relapse again, fucking write my obituary because I don't have another recovery left in me. And then I showed a clip of me and my son and the relationship that I have with him today. It just kind of shows a little timeline of myself walking through my addiction. And I just want to show that struggling alcoholic and addict, that person that's still suffering, that, man, I did it recently, about a
Yeah.
year and a half ago. I came out of that. And if I can make it out of that dark place, man, and come out of it and tell my story, I died twice. I had 2 heart attacks. I had heart surgery. I overdosed at the parking lot. Man, at the strip club parking lot with my girlfriend, where I had so many things that went wrong, in and out of jails, in and out of rehabs, man. And I'm standing here today to be able to tell that story. You know,
It's impressive.
Thank you.
So, let me ask you, addiction, crime, organized crime, everything. Do you feel like you escaped it all, or do you think it's always just going to be a lifelong battle?
I, I, I so there's a different way that certain people look at addiction. You know, there's a lot of people that look at addiction as a weakness because when you're classified as an addict, especially like in the community of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, shit like that, it shows you powerlessness. We are powerless over alcohol, and our life has become unmanageable. That is step number one. And that's the most important step in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Now, true powerlessness, I don't believe that we have true powerlessness. I think that we can recover from addiction. But I also believe that at any time, because I've been sober for 10 years before and relapsed. My last relapse, I was sober for 7 years when I relapsed, So I don't think that there's a timeline on it. I do believe that if I pick up again, I'm immediately going to start, it's going to be a wrap, right? So I'll always be an addict, but I'm not powerless. I can recover from addiction, meaning today I don't have to drink. Today I'm not gonna drink. I got shit to do. I got whole plans. I got me and you. I got to go back to the gym. I have a whole night schedule planned out, right? That of stuff that I'm gonna do that does not require me drinking. Unfortunately, there's statistics that show me differently, right? The statistics in the United States of America in 2025 showed that 85 to 90% of people that go through a 30-day treatment center relapse within the first year. That means only 10 to 15% of people stay sober.
What do you think
And
makes them different, that 10 to 15%? What allows them to keep going on with their journey?
I believe strongly, and this is what I push more than anything is aftercare and community, right? I don't treatment, then that's what I was telling you earlier today, is that I don't think that recovery happens in treatment centers, right? I don't, man, I can go right here to my desk and pull out all these certificates from all these treatment centers that I've been through. They're all different, they're all stamped, and I'm standing there, I got a little picture and shit like this, standing there smiling because I graduated from a treatment center. You know what I'm saying? And I'm recovered. According to them, I've completed their curriculum and I am free of drugs and alcohol for 30 days. Now I can go and that they sign me off and they say, good luck. If you relapse, come on back. We're here to help. Right. So this is the thing, is that recovery does not happen in treatment. It doesn't. Recovery happens in community. Recovery happens what you do after you leave treatment. The proper aftercare plans, whether it be PHP, IOP, whether it be getting involved into different groups like AA, NA, Refuge Recovery, Smart Recovery, a church group, somebody that has similar life experiences that you can hang out with, that you can talk to, that you can share what you're going through and help you navigate the avenues of life through addiction. Because normal people don't understand what we've gone through. Right. So if I'm done drinking, if I've been sober for 30 days and I go right back to that same barrio to my homeboys that are chilling on the corner, drinking, getting fucked up every day, chances are I'm going to drink again because it's a normality. That's what we do. Oh, you've been sober for 30 days. You're good. You won't fuck it up this time. Man, that's not true. Right. Because eventually when I drug, the last time that this is my last relapse that I had, I was drinking a handle of whiskey a day. You know how much a handle of whiskey is? That's a huge bottle of whiskey, a day by myself, and over an 8 ball of cocaine, almost 2 8 balls of cocaine every day, which is that's why I overdose, right? Because I do a lot of shit, right? So it's like that's where I end up. Now I could pick up a beer right now, Omar, and enjoy it with you, a cocktail, and enjoy it with you, and I probably won't go to jail. I probably won't mess things up. But what's going to happen is going to trigger something in my head, and they're going to tell you, now you can do it. Now you have control. Now you can handle it. So the next time I feel anxious, depression, disassociation, anxiety, I'm struggling with mental health, I just picked up that drink and nothing bad happened. So now I'm telling my mind again, hey, you can use that again to help you feel better because you want to feel good. And I do. And I'll do it a lot. And I'll do it excessively because I'm always battling with my mental health. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that you've gone through all this and you're still pushing. Even when people have shunned you away, even when the
Yeah.
struggles got real. What do you think it is? What did all this experience teach you about distractions? Because you said you wanted to do it to feel good. And I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people who aren't addicts, we do a lot of things just because we want to feel good. And as you said earlier, emotions are not always reality. So, what did all of your experiences teach you about distractions? All the different ways we distract ourselves when we're sober?
So there's two things that I've learned in life, right? Number one is discipline is key. Discipline and consistency is key to help me relieve myself from my distractions. If I can stay vigilant in my discipline, in my routines, if I set small goals, right, I will be able to deal myself from distractions. But also, if I need distractions from my life, like your party time, hanging out, doing stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like you want to feel relief, you want to feel better. There's other ways to do it other than using drugs and alcohol,
Video
right?
games.
Whatever you want. Well, I mean, video games can be an addiction too. There's a treatment center in Austin now that's for tech addiction, and
Wow.
it's yeah, and I've walked it, and I met the directors there, and when I was walking the facility, man, I've seen people walking up to you, man, just like addicts, man, that are going through active withdrawals or shit. They're scratching, they're sweaty, they're like, hey, man,
Wow.
can I see your phone? Can I see your phone real quick? They just want to see your phone so they can get screen time.
Man, they
It's
have a
like a
technology
drug.
obesity, huh?
It's a type of addiction. But I
Yeah.
mean, like I find other avenues. Like I like to work out a lot. I do enjoy talking to my friends, like other sober people. I like to read scripture. I like to read the Bible. I like to talk to God. I like to meditate. I love to listen to music, and I love spending time with my kids. Today I have that relationship again because I lost them, and I know what it was like to lose them. Um, in 2008 2007, 2008, when I first got sober the first time, I remember walking into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there was this lady that was sitting there, and she was sharing a story about how she had willingly gave up her children or her daughter to Child Protective Services because she needed to do more heroin because that's how addicted she was to heroin. And I've never seen something so powerful that would allow a woman to give up her child for a drug, right? So, and I thought to myself at that time, I was like, how could she do that? Like the audacity, right? And at the time, I had a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. My children that are grown now, they're way past their 20s. But they were in those meetings with me. They would go to meetings with me all the time. I made 90 meetings in 90 days. I was, an advocate in the recovery community, and I never fathomed that. And then when I relapsed this last time, I got divorced from my wife of 27 years. And in the divorce decree, it stated that if I relapsed again, that I would lose my son. I would lose custody. And I would only see him under supervised visits a couple times a month. Now, my son, Mateo, my 6-year-old today, he's my light. He's everything to me. I love him more than anything in this world. And I had him. I had just got back from rehab because I had relapsed, and she didn't take him from me, but I had him. I was sober for maybe 3 months or so, and I took him to school. And there's a line in the big book that says there was not a cloud in the horizon. Nothing was wrong. I had no anxiety. I had no depression. I had no PTSD. I had nothing wrong with me. But the thought crossed my mind after I dropped off at school that maybe I could just pick up one of those little bottles of whiskey. Not a big one because I don't want to, do anything bad. But I know I've been sober for 10 years. I've been sober for 7 years. I can handle it this time. It's not going to be a problem. Right. And that's that addict mind just lying to myself. Right. And I picked up that little bottle of whiskey, and before I knew it, I was a fifth in, and I passed out on my couch. I passed out on my couch, and I forgot to pick him up from school. I was asleep. So, my wife ended up picking him up, and I called her when I woke up, like 20 minutes late, and she said, "Yeah, I got him." And she came and picked him up. She came to drop him off, and then realized that I had relapsed again, and she took him from me. Ultimately, she took him from me. She filed the paperwork and took him from me. So I say that story because now I do understand that lady that I walked in on 20 years ago in that room of Alcoholics Anonymous that gave up her daughter because of using heroin to Child Protective Services. Because just like her, I gave up my son, knowing that in the divorce decree it stated that if I drank again, that I was going to give him up. And I drank again, man. I rolled the dice because I didn't think I'd get caught. I didn't think I was going to get fucked up, and I did. You know, and addiction. That's why, to me, I have such a passion to help people that struggle with drug and alcohol use and mental health because of the life that I've lived in it. Since I was 14 years old. And I think, if we circle back to marketing and branding yourself and selling yourself, I think I'm so good at it because I'm very transparent. Not a lot of people would be vulnerable enough, Omar, to tell that story that I just told because there's so much shame and guilt involved in it. But it's a big part of my story because it tells you that the thing that I love most in this world that I treasure, that I would be willing to give up for that next drink because of my addiction, how hard it is. And you know what, man? As much as I hated my ex-wife for taking him from me, today I thank her for that because I wasn't in a good place. When I'm actively using and drinking, I have no business taking care of my son. He's not. I'm not the best fit for him. But today, where I'm at, man, he's my best friend.
Wow.
And I get to be with him every day, man. It's amazing. God is good, man. It really
Yeah.
is.
Thanks for sharing that. And again, I like how you're telling the truth because that's another lesson that I've recently that's Alex Ramosi. I don't know if you heard of him. He's a great entrepreneur as well. He emphasizes that state the facts, tell the truth. And it's hard, as you said, because there can be shame. There's something embarrassing about that, the guilt, the realization that yeah, I messed up. But
Yeah,
when you embrace the truth of it, it's it's so fascinating how it makes you all the more powerful. So I
right.
really appreciate you sharing that because yeah, that was it's tough. It's tough to do
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
But Mundo, thank you so much for sharing all your experiences. I'm wondering, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you felt like you wanted to say but you didn't get a chance to, or something on your mind that you wanted to express?
No, man. You know, I think we circle back to how we opened up this episode about marketing and branding yourself, right? And I think number one is you love what you do, believe in what you do, right? Because if you're going to market or brand something and attach your name to it, that's your name that you're attaching to it. So you have to believe in it, and make it be something that you could truly invest yourself in, so that when you are marketing whatever services you're marketing, it's authentic, because a lot of people can see through the bullshit. They can see through it, and be truthful, be transparent, be likable. Because like I said, treatment centers are a dime a dozen. The only reason that people want to do business with me is because they understand me and they know that I have the client's best interest at heart because of my personal life experiences. Right? I know I would never want my worst enemy to suffer the things that I've suffered in my addiction. Right? So I try to help out as many people as I can. So believe in what you do. Be honest, be transparent, and then grind, man. Grind. You gotta hustle. An old school cat once told me there's no such thing as a bad meeting. Make every meeting. Because you never know, that janitor that you're meeting right now could be the CEO of the next company tomorrow. And if you helped
Yes,
him and you gave him a little words of wisdom, then
yes.
he'll never forget.
No, it's true. It's true. And I like how you mentioned that. It is very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm glad that we got to do this, because I do
Yeah, me
remember
too.
meeting you and I felt like you would be a good person to talk to about this stuff. So I appreciate everything you shared. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if that's about it, I suppose until next time, man.
All right, brother. God is
Yeah.
love.